The day they summoned me into that glass-walled conference room, the sunlight fell across the floor like an accusation. Too bright, too honest, too revealing for what they were about to do. It felt as if the room itself wanted to witness my undoing. The walls, transparent and cold, reflected the faint outlines of people walking outside, unaware that inside this transparent cage, my life was about to be quietly dismantled. The HR director smiled with a softness that felt rehearsed, almost memorized. Across from him, the operations head pretended to be absorbed in a folder, though the tremor in his fingers betrayed more than calm professionalism. They had clearly practiced their lines, gentle words sharpened into weapons, wrapped in corporate courtesy. Your role has been marked as redundant. The sentence floated toward me like a feather dipped in poison. I felt my heart knock once, then twice, louder than their explanations, louder than the papers sliding toward me. They spoke of restructuring, organizational reshaping, cost management. But beneath those sterilized words, I heard the truth. You no longer matter here. Redundant. Expendable. Replaceable. I had devoted years to those walls, late nights, missed family gatherings, sacrifices nobody ever saw. And now they brushed me aside with the same ease one deletes an unwanted file. I walked out carrying a cardboard box, the cliched symbol of corporate exile. But the heaviest thing I carried wasn't inside the box, it was inside me. The weight of betrayal. The weight of invisibility. None of them knew it, not then, not even as they signed my termination, but their decision had cracked open a hidden vault I was never meant to see. A secret powerful enough to turn the entire company upside down. And I was standing at the edge of discovering it. The morning began like any other, the sound of the elevator humming upward, the soft click of my heels across the newly polished floor, the faint aroma of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. Nothing warned me. Nothing whispered, today will end your years here. My inbox was its usual battlefield, requests, approvals, updates. But one email sat at the top, marked immediate and stamped with the cold insignia of HR. Please report to conference room 5B at 10 a.m. No greeting. No explanation. Just a time and a place. My throat tightened as I reread the message. Something inside me stirred, an instinct sharpened by too many years of watching colleagues disappear after similar summons. By the time I reached the conference room, a thin sheen of dread coated my palms. The room felt colder than the hallway. The blinds were partially drawn, slicing sunlight into uneven stripes across the floor. The HR director, a man who wore gentleness like a uniform, gestured for me to sit. Two others joined him, one from finance, one from operations. None of them met my eyes. We're undergoing structural changes, the director began, voice soft enough to lull a child to sleep. Due to budget pressures, several roles have been identified as overlapping. Overlapping. A word meant to sound reasonable. A word meant to hide cruelty. My position, they explained, was no longer essential. They spoke of efficiency, streamlining, fiscal responsibility. Each phrase was a polished stone, smooth and bloodless. But beneath the corporate vocabulary, I sensed something familiar, the artificial calm of people hiding something. A folder slid across the table. My severance package. A list of exit procedures. A script for me to read if anyone asked why I had left. Every page was a quiet erasure of the years I had poured into this place. I signed because my hands wouldn't stop trembling. By the time I stepped outside, the sun felt different, too bright, almost mocking. I inhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. That's when my phone buzzed. A message. Sent from a restricted, internal extension. Check your severance clause. Section 14B. They missed something. My heart lurched. Missed something? The timing was too precise. Too deliberate. As I stood in the parking lot, clutching my cardboard box, I realized this termination wasn't simply about redundancy. It was a doorway. A crack in their careful machine. And someone inside wanted me to step through it. The confidential message led me into a world I never knew existed, an underbelly made not of shadows and whispers, but numbers. Cold, clinical numbers that hid more truth than any confession. I opened my severance document again, this time with trembling focus. Section 14B. A clause most employees would never notice, buried in legal jargon designed to lull the eye into skipping over it. But there it was. A payout trigger tied not to standard redundancy dismissal, but to executive-level restructuring. A classification someone had applied to my case without HR realizing its implications. My severance wasn't standard. It was massive. Obscenely massive. Almost intentional. Curiosity sharpened into suspicion. That night, I opened my laptop. The confidential message contained a link, an internal financial repository accessible only to mid-tier finance roles. Yet my credentials still worked. They had forgotten to revoke my access. Their mistake. My beginning. What I found there stopped my breath. Annual statements polished to perfection for shareholders, but beneath them, unreported bonuses, safety nets for executives, golden parachutes disguised as performance incentives. And buried in a subfolder labeled Archival, Deferred Compensation. My own severance calculation. My payout was larger than the CEO's annual bonus. A loophole. A technicality. A detail they had overlooked in their eagerness to erase me. But the deeper I dug, the darker the truth became. There were other files. Other employees. Other redundancies. Patterns emerged. Same wording. Same timing. Same forced exits. But the real shock came when I opened one final document, one that wasn't meant for my eyes. A strategy report detailing a planned reduction of employees to artificially inflate profitability metrics before the next board meeting. My firing was not an accident. It was a move on a board. A calculated sacrifice. And they never expected me to discover the one flaw capable of undoing all of it. Once the first crack appeared, the entire facade began to crumble. Name after name surfaced, employees I remembered, people who had left suddenly, quietly, with vague statements about restructuring. People who had looked hollow on their last day, as if they were carrying invisible wounds. All marked redundant. All within the same time frame. All with job descriptions suspiciously altered just weeks before termination. I began piecing everything together, each document a thread, each story a stitch. Slowly, a disturbing tapestry emerged, one of deliberate manipulation. This wasn't downsizing. It was cleansing. Disguised, calculated, hidden under spreadsheets and corporate euphemisms. The deeper I went, the more I realized I was navigating a labyrinth designed to protect power, not employees. Executives had built an empire whose foundation was silence. Silence purchased through fear. Silence cemented through legal wording. But then I found something that changed everything. A ledger. A private one. Accessible only through a forgotten subdomain. It documented undisclosed executive benefits, some legal, many not. Payments routed through subsidiaries. Bonuses labeled as risk adjustments. Approval signatures that contradicted official company announcements. And in the middle of it all, my name. Next to a note. Non-essential asset. Removal beneficial to quarterly optics. Asset. Removal. As if I had never been a person. As if my years of service were merely numbers on a sheet. My anger sharpened. Not wild, not reckless, controlled, precise. For the first time since they fired me, I felt something ignite in my chest that wasn't grief. It was resolve. I printed documents. Screenshotted patterns. Saved testimony from former colleagues desperate to speak but too afraid to be heard. Piece by piece, I constructed the truth. The real truth, not the polished narrative they fed the board, not the sanitized version they presented at meetings. A truth heavy enough to collapse their empire. But the final blow came unexpectedly. It was hidden inside a confidential memo between two executives discussing my termination. The memo revealed. My role had not been redundant. My termination had not been necessary. And worst of all, they had forged financial projections to justify firing me. The very act meant to erase me had instead handed me the weapon capable of destroying everything they built. Walking back into their skyscraper felt like walking into the scene of my own death, only this time, I carried the truth like armor. The receptionists glanced up, startled. They must have thought I was back to beg, to plead, to negotiate. But I walked with a stillness that unsettled even me. Not anger. Not desperation. Certainty. I rode the elevator in silence. The higher it climbed, the calmer I became. Justice has a strange way of slowing the heartbeat, not quickening it. When the doors opened on the executive floor, their faces shifted immediately, shock flickering into irritation, irritation into unease. The HR director stood first. "This isn't appropriate," he stammered. I placed a folder on the table. "This," I said quietly, "is the truth." Document by document, I laid everything before them. The forged projections, the illegal routing of funds, the executive bonuses disguised as incentives, the pattern of wrongful terminations hidden under falsified records. Each page was a mirror, and they hated the reflection. "This is confidential information," the operations head snapped. "So is severance data," I replied. "Yet you mislabeled my classification. That mistake activated a payout you were too careless to notice." Silence. Thick. Unbreathing. The finance executive leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. With each new document, his confidence cracked further. You weren't supposed to see these. But I did." "And what do you want?" he finally asked, voice strained. I met his gaze. Accountability. The word dropped like a stone into the center of the room. I slid the final document across the table, a memo proving they fabricated data to justify firing me. "This ends today." And then I gave them the final blow, the sentence that sealed their downfall. "I've already submitted everything to the board and an external auditor. They're expecting my formal statement in an hour." Panic devoured the room. The people who once dismissed me now looked small, fragile, breakable. Their empire wasn't collapsing. It had already collapsed. They were only just realizing it. And I walked out with the calm of someone who finally understood her value, someone who learned that being erased does not mean being powerless. Sometimes, erasure is the beginning of being truly seen. Sometimes life doesn't fall apart, it falls into place. If this story touched you, stay with me for more journeys of pain, truth, and justice.